Good morning, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us for the webinar this morning. I'm delighted to have Alexa and Russell join us on the call, who are going to be sharing their experience of running a CRM strategy within their own organisations. The approach that we're going to take with the webinar this morning is we're going to be looking at the 6 key ingredients to a CRM strategy, with the ultimate aim of how to enthuse, engage, and empower people to embed a system. So we're going to work through an agenda of just sharing what those 6 ingredients are, looking at what success looks like, and for Alexa and Russell to really share their experience of how they've done a CRM strategy in not only one organisation but 2 organisations, and what they've learned from doing the first and what they're now putting in place at their second organisation they're working with. So just to introduce ourselves, so I'm Heather Black, Managing Director of Economic Change. We're a specialist boutique organisation that implements Salesforce for non-profits. And with me on the call, we've got Alexa and Russell. Alexa, do you just want to introduce yourself?
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, so my name's Alexa Sage and I work at Thomas Pocklington Trust. We're a national charity supporting blind and partially sighted people across the UK, but we also do a lot of support to our partner organisations working in the sector as well. And I'm the Head of Impact and Evaluation at Thomas Pocklington Trust, so TPT for short.
Great. And Russell, do you want to say hi to everybody and just introduce yourself, please?
Yes, hello. My name's Russell Cable, and I also work for Thomas Pocklington Trust as a data systems manager. We're just currently embarking on implementing a Salesforce system across all of TPT and all of its partners.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, both of you, and thank you for joining us on a Monday morning, bright and early. So we started working together, I think, was it 3 years ago now, when you were at Visionary, and we put a system into place focused around membership, wasn't it, Alexa, originally? I think, yeah.
Yeah, so about 3 years ago, I was seconded to one of our partner organisations, Visionary, another national charity. It's a membership organisation for all local sight loss charities in the UK. So we had about 140 members. And at the time, we were driving ourselves insane trying to put together all the different spreadsheets and scraps of paper and membership forms that we had coming in by post, all handwritten. And we really needed a CRM to be able to manage the 140 strong membership, and so that was when our journey with economic change started, and they've been with us on our journey ever since.
Great, thank you. And I think in terms of context, so now you're quite self-sustaining, but we have a support contract with you to support on design and more technical elements. So we can talk about that journey as we go through. So I think it's great. You know, what I love to advocate is that Salesforce can be self-managed. And Russell, you've trained yourself up, haven't you, internally? We provide you with some support, and you sort of develop and manage those systems now, Russell. So Russell, do you want to just talk about a little bit about your journey about, you know, learning more about Salesforce and becoming a system manager, because that's wasn't what you were originally doing when you originally, was it? Russell, are you there? Do you want to just share a little bit about your journey and how you've trained up in Salesforce?
Would it help if I gave a bit of background whilst we're trying to reconnect with Russell?
Absolutely, go for it.
So when I was in Visionary, I'd used Salesforce in previous organisations and had done some basic administration myself. But we at that point felt we really needed, as it was about the very first journey, very first steps, to get some professionals involved, and an economic change came highly recommended, and also happened to be working in the same building as us, which was really helpful. And after we'd had an initial package of support from economic change, we were able to get our system up and running. And at that point, when we realized just how well it was working for us, and it was something we wanted to continue to invest in, we were recruiting for a new member of staff a member engagement coordinator. And fortunately, Russell applied for the job. It wasn't initially there as a Salesforce administrator role specifically. We did say that would be great if someone did have that experience. And then Russell came on board and had some basic Salesforce administration skills. He'd been supporting his local charity, and then particularly using the Salesforce Trailhead modules, and also going through the experience of working with economic change and learning the processes and the systems that they used and their advice. Between us, we were able to really build up our skill set and knowledge around Salesforce. And Russell's continued to take that development forward. And then after I came back to TPT as head of impact and evaluation, we didn't have a CRM at the time, and we were really keen to do better impact measurement, and that really drove the need to have a comprehensive CRM. And we'd had such a brilliant experience both with Salesforce and working with economic change, that it didn't take much to decide on going ahead with Salesforce for TPT. And it was at that point I recruited for a data systems manager, as I realised TPT is quite a complex organisation. We've got lots of different functions, and we were also going to be supporting 3 of our partner charities to set up their own Salesforce systems as well. So we felt at that point it really was worth investing in someone who'd have responsibility for rolling that out full time. And Russell applied for the job internally, and joined me back again in TPT. And continues to use the support from economic change. But whereas before we would do all of our project management, our process mapping, we were being supported with, as well as the development through economic change. Now it's more of a safety net. And being able just to check in. So now when Russell's got an idea of different ways that he could do things, we use economic change to sort of check in and say, well, based on your experience and how other charities that you've worked with have done this, which way would you recommend, or what risks might you be aware of that we might not have considered? So I think we think of economic change as a safety net now, and as an expert critical friend, if you will. So that's incredibly reassuring. But yeah, we have gone from being almost completely dependent on economic change to being able to establish our own systems for a medium-sized organisation involving 4 different charity partners.
Right, it's an amazing story, and I think it's a really important one in that organizations should be able to be self-managing of their Salesforce instance. I think the other question I'd like to throw in here, or a point that is useful for the audience, is for a charity, and obviously the charity and the membership network that you work with, one of the important considerations, and that the software that you were going to use was could support people with disabilities, and particularly visual impairment, to use the system.
Absolutely.
So one of the things that you were doing from your point of view when you started this journey was like, well, let me make sure that the software that we choose to use, does support that. And so you can, that was one of your considerations. So it'd be just great for you to share how Salesforce does support your end users in that way, and how you found it adaptable.
Absolutely. So as I said, we're a national charity supporting blind and partially sighted people, and we try to practice what we preach. And so we make great efforts to ensure that our own workforce, through our trustees, our staff, and our volunteers, are representative of the people that we're here to serve. So a lot of my colleagues are affected by sight loss themselves, and one of the major ways that technology becomes becomes accessible to people with sight loss is through the use of assistive technology. So mainly using screen magnification, where the screen appears considerably larger, or color inversion, different color schemes, but also screen readers that are a text to speech software essentially, and will read the screen to someone even who has no sight at all, and they would be able to navigate. But one of the issues that we have is that when software is designed, often it just isn't designed with accessibility in mind. So where you might have an image, for example, often the alternative text isn't there. So someone with a screen reader wouldn't be able to know that there's an image there, for example. And so a lot of the different CRMs that we were testing out just weren't fully accessible, particularly to the screen readers. And it was absolutely essential for us that whichever software whichever CRM we went with, it had to be inclusive and accessible to all of our staff. Obviously, Salesforce has the advantage that it's the world's most widely used CRM, and they have a whole inclusion team devoted to making sure that that the CRM is accessible to people, not just with sight loss, but with different disabilities who might be using assistive technology to help them interact. When we were working with economic change, I know some of your colleagues did have experience supporting, there was one deaf charity, and so we were really encouraged that there was already that kind of awareness at economic change. But even when we had questions about Salesforce, that accessibility, that economic change weren't able to answer, they even put us in touch with their colleagues at Salesforce and set up a meeting with us. So we had economic change, Salesforce and Visionary at the time sat around the table, being able to talk through all of our concerns around the accessibility. And from there, we had all of our questions answered. We were really reassured, and we made sure that when we were doing our user testing, that we had people who were using different assistive technologies to interact with Salesforce all being represented. And at the time, we implemented Salesforce Classic, but even Salesforce Lightning now, compared to where we were with Salesforce Classic, is incredibly accessible. And considering how complex Salesforce can be, and how much functionality it has, I'm still amazed at how wonderfully accessible they have managed to make it. So, and we haven't found a CRM that rivals that. So that was absolutely essential to us, and Salesforce met that criteria, and economic change supported us to be able to understand whether it was a CRM that would meet our needs or not.
Brilliant, thanks, Alexa. And I think it's exciting, the partnership that we've got, you know, where we're working with you guys going forward to make sure that as a consultancy, we deliver training to Salesforce admins. And so Thomas Pocklington Trust and their team are now making sure that how we deliver our training to Salesforce admins is accessible, using a range of different software. So we're really excited about working with you on that, and also being able to train up more beneficiaries. So supporting people with experience sight loss, and help them to become Salesforce administrators and to access more roles in that sector, because it's certainly you know, it's been great to see that is a career opportunity, that it can progress, and that we're making that more accessible now.
Yeah, and it's so reassuring to work with a partner organisation that is so evidently committed to inclusion and accessibility as well. A lot of people will pay it lip service or do the bare minimum that they need to, but economic change, I feel have really gone out of their way to not only support us, but to then look at themselves and see, well, how can we become more inclusive and accessible? And I'm really excited about the potential to work more closely, providing support to people with sight loss to become administrators and developers. So watch this space.
Yeah, really exciting opportunity. So let's dig down into some of the detail as we work through our slides today. So it's given all of you hopefully some context as the story so far. What we're going to reflect on as we sort of delve into, as I say, the last 3-year journey that Alexa and Russell have gone through is looking at what we consider the 4 kind of key pillars to any Salesforce implementation. It's something that economic change sort of does a blended strategy with organizations. So we help organizations think about their management process and strategy and sort of nail that down really and benefit from what technology can do to reduce administration, improve efficiency. So we talk through what is your day-to-day role and work, and how can we help speed that up or improve it using Salesforce and the technology. And overall, any non-profit has a level of impact measurement, so they want to understand, well, actually, how are we helping people, and benefiting them? So how do we track that? So we talk about reports and dashboards and how we would track all of that. So I'll let Alexa and Russell talk a bit about how that was reflected in their system development. And then the 4th bit is around change management. That's very much going, well, how do we support people through this process? Because 2 or 3 of us can sit in a room and say, oh yes, let's do this and that, but unless people really get involved in that design process and understand it and get excited by it, that's what's going to help embed a system, because everybody wants to be part of it and use it every day. So we'll be reflecting on change management and how that rolled out at the organisation at Visionary and Thomas Pocklington Trust as we are now. So the 6 key ingredients that we're going to look at is around project management and how you manage a CRM strategy, particularly from an internal point of view. We're going to look at senior engagement and how different team or departmental leads got on board with it, and how that support process was supported. We're then going to look at executive sponsorship. Now, within executive sponsorship, we could be looking at the trustee board or the senior management, like CEO, other directors within the organisation, how and why they got on board with it. We're then going to look at business analysis, and that's how you get people involved in the design process and get their input into what a CRM should do. Then we're going to touch on change management, how we support people to adopt and train them to engage in the system. And then we're going to look at data integrity. So how do you maintain good quality data within the system long term? Now, if you get this strategy right with those 6 key ingredients, how do you measure your success? So I talk about the 4 E's, if you like. The first is enthuse. So how do you get high level of interest from people? You want to be able to gauge that, how would I know that people are enthused here? Well, you want to see a high level of interest, you want to see positive energy, and you want to see that they're motivated to learn. So they are keen to engage in meetings and they turn up at meetings. So first thing is, are people enthusiastic? The second is, are they then engaged? So do they understand what the clear benefits are for them? Because each person should be able to sort of understand what the benefits for them the system will have. How will it help them with their job role going forward and make their life easier? We want to see this high participation rate. So that's, as I say, people turning up for meetings, people allocating time to plan for the design, because it does require a lot of thought before a design session, and within that design session that they get actively involved and have prepared the necessary things. So you want to make sure that people are engaged. Then you want to empower them. So co-design is important, and you might take a different approach to business analysis depending on the size of your organisation and the different roles people have. So we'll talk through the different ways to do that. But then you'll also want to involve them in user testing and training and support. So again, attendance is important. Participation and feedback is important. So you want to empower people during this process. And finally, you want to look at embedding a system. So you'll want to have a team of internal champions. You'll want to look at level of user adoption, and you'll want to look at data integrity and be able to measure how good is this. So we'll talk through some of the ways that you could measure the level of user adoption and the quality of data integrity as we talk through the slides today. So delving into the first aspect around project management. So the things that we champion and encourage people to have is to use an internal project management tool, which could be as simple as a spreadsheet, or it could be a piece of software to help you manage what needs to happen internally within an organisation and to have your own project management plan. Now, the third question that we ask clients is, do you want to work in an agile way or a waterfall project management way? Typically, it's best practice to use agile project management with technology projects, which means that you have an agreed budget, and quite often a non-profit will have a grant that have been given to do it, or they've got a set amount of money available for core development, and that's the budget that you have available. So within that fixed budget, you then start the process of designing and prioritizing, and you work through an iteration process where everything is prioritized and you work on the must-have requirements first, and then you'll work through all of those must-haves to the point that you then say, okay, well, we've got some budget left, let's do some of the should-haves or could-haves, which are the, you know, the lesser priority deliverables, but you've still got budget left. And that means that you know, there's a shared agreement over what gets done. The other benefit of Agile and why it came into post is that during the time that the project is delivered, quite often requirements can change and things and technology changes. So it allows you to continue to iterate the design and requirements based on what is happening externally, whether it's new software, new priorities come into play, you know, new requirements suddenly spring up. So you can use that budget as you need to. In contrast to waterfall, waterfall means that you have a very fixed technical specification at the beginning. Now, quite often what happens is you will spend a bit of budget on design first. That means that a technical specification can then be agreed and written up, and then you work through that technical agreement, and that's fixed in stone for the budget that you've agreed with that supplier or internally. So there's a different approach and strategy that you would take. So reflecting back on now the project management approach you took at Visionary and what you're applying now at Thomas Pocklington, Alexia, do you want to share a little bit about how you're approaching project management?
Sure. Well, when we were at Visionary, none of our partner organizations had a CRM, and so there wasn't really much understanding about why it was needed, the value of it. We did do a lot of work to try to educate our colleagues, and we obviously did manage to get the buy-in from our senior management and executives, but the way that we sort of agreed that we would embark on this project was that we were given a very small budget initially to do the things that we knew were essential, things that we would have really struggled to be in, where we would have really struggled to be an effective organization if we didn't have these functions on a CRM. So that really guided us more to a waterfall style of project management, where we knew there were particular things that we had to do. We had quite a small time frame and a small budget to be able to prove that the CRM was the right way to go, that we'd got the right CRM, and that it was therefore worth investing more in the future. But even then, even as we were doing that project, we did find, particularly when we were doing our own process mapping, that our requirements were changing, and an economic change worked really well to respond to that, even though we'd sort of set out at the beginning saying, well, this is what we think we need. But I think that's one of the advantages of working with consultants like Economic Change, is that what you think you might need at the beginning and is often different from what you actually need, except you'll only find that out during the project management process. And so after we'd finished the initial build, we gave it time for people to start adopting the system and starting to understand the benefits of it, and for that news and excitement to spread a bit more throughout the organization. And then when it came to doing further development, we did then start taking a more agile approach. Now that we are going through the process again, at TPT, we are taking a much more agile approach. And I think that's really important, especially given the scale and the complexity of what we're trying to do. Within our charity, we have lots of different functions. In Visionary, we were just we were a membership organisation, and that was our key function. And regardless of which team you were in, we operated in a very similar way and offered very similar services. Whereas at TPT, we have a whole type of different ways that we operate, from research to policy to advocacy to frontline services, and the fact that we're also supporting our partner organisations as well to adopt their own Salesforce CRM for that level of complexity, and also in an organisation where things are changing a lot. For us, we're going through a lot of internal changes at the moment. Having that agile approach where you build a bit, see if it works, build a bit more, see how that works, maybe decide that actually that direction isn't right, you change, you go to another direction. I feel that that's been a much more sustainable approach than if we'd have adopted a waterfall project management for TPT and our partners.
Great, thanks, Alexia. Russell, have you got anything you'd like to add?
I think we've still lost him.
Oh, bless. Okay. No worries. Okay, Russell, hopefully we can get you back online in a moment. It was definitely working earlier. Okay, so we'll crack on with the next one. Hopefully we can get your audio sorted. So in terms of moving on then, looking at senior managers to buy in. So Alexia, we'd love to know how you did convince people, because it sounded like that was obviously something you were, you had to do on your journey of implementing CRMs at the membership organisation, and what you did now, really. So when we talk about senior managers, it's those that are managing a team day to day, really, within their different respective departments. And how do we get them excited about it? Because they're so busy on their day to day job that moving to a new software can be a bit of a can be very nerve-wracking for them, because it means they have to change the way they work and rethink how they do things. For some, they might be super excited about it, whereas others might be like, well, we've got loads to do day to day, so how do we fit this in? So it really is gauging, what their enthusiasm is. And if you can start, the way that I always like people to think about this is it's about that sales pitch. You've got to sell it to them. So one of the key methods of selling is understand what people's pain points are right now, and then tell them how you can help them, because we all buy something because it's going to help us. We don't necessarily always need it, right? But we can always come up with a reason why we might need it if we want something. So, you need to kind of think through, well, what are your pain points? Talk them through that. And then based on that information, share with them relevant case studies, that demonstrate how this solution has helped solve somebody else's similar problem. And so, identify what their goals are, what their needs are, show them relevant case studies, and show them the technology itself. So get a technical demo. So that could be by inviting a partner in to show them a demo. It might be about having a prototype built, which some of our clients do pay for, or it might be about attending a Salesforce event where you can see it there and then. Now, in terms of case studies, it might be that you can share a video with them that you find online, which maybe a partner or Salesforce has shared. It might be that you can read a blog, or it might be that I've also seen where customers share references and actually visit each other to talk through how it's worked for them. So it all provides confidence, to those senior managers. Actually, okay, I can see why this solution is going to help me overcome these pain points and meet my needs. And as a department, as I say, what are those SMART goals? So if it's the case that you're speaking to a fundraising team, they're like, well, we need to increase our fundraising. And you're going, okay, well, the solution I can put in place with you is going to help your online fundraising, and is actually going to speed up the way that people can donate to you. And you can better understand who in your donors is actually now signed up to online fundraising, and you improve all of that. So we're going to help you increase your online fundraising target. You know, that would be the ultimate objective of putting in new technology. So bouncing it back to Alexa and Russell, how did you tackle this? How did you get demos, case studies, or other ways of convincing senior managers to understand what Salesforce is first off, and then to buy into the whole process of using it?
Sure. So the first thing that we did, and also this was a little part of our due diligence as well, because there were so many different consultants out there promising wonderful things about how they were going to help us on our Salesforce journey, all with different backgrounds, all with different price points, all different sizes and locations. So as part of our due diligence, and when we were contacting economic change, initially about how they might be able to help, Heather really kindly put us in touch with some of her previous clients, and so just over email we were able to have some quick exchanges to kind of get a very brief understanding of how it had been not only working with economic change, but also how it had been for the charity adopting Salesforce, and what challenges that they'd faced, and how we might be able to learn from those and avoid them on ourselves. So we started off by getting some references from other organizations who'd gone on a similar journey. And then we did go to another organization for a live demonstration. Funnily enough, it was Russell's local charity that he was working for at the time, where he'd started their Salesforce journey for them, and was doing the Salesforce administration. And Russell talked us through how it had made a difference to the local charity there, to being able to manage the data, be more efficient, look more professional, keep their data safer. And the fact that he had taught himself to do it, and was showing us some really cool stuff, really reassured us that this was something that we would be able to do, and that didn't require hiring someone, with a huge amount of experience at an extortionate salary, that it was something that we could be able to take on ourselves with a little bit of support at the start. So that demonstration really helped get buy-in as well. I think actually until someone actually sees a live demonstration, it's really difficult if you haven't worked with a CRM before to understand exactly what it means. And unfortunately, a lot of our senior management hadn't worked with a CRM. They certainly hadn't worked with Salesforce, and not in a sight loss sector context. So I think the demonstrations have been a key part of getting the senior management engaged. The other thing that we said was we were willing to be guinea pigs for TPT and our partner organizations. We knew that they didn't have a CRM either, and that it was certainly on their minds as well that they might need to consider such a thing, especially given how the size of the charity was growing very quickly. So we offered to be the guinea pigs, so that they could learn from our lessons and our journey, and also for the benefit of our members as well. Our member charity organizations have the same challenges as us, and we're also thinking about adopting CRMs or adopting different CRMs, and so we really kind of sold it as well. We can be a learning point for our sector, and we did share our findings very widely, and that was really helpful for other organizations trying to make similar decisions. I think it helped that a lot of the staff who were working on the front line and managing a lot of data day to day, so the people who were processing our membership forms and organizing the membership events and our annual conference, I think it was really obvious to the people on the ground that the only way to do this was going to be with a CRM, because it was taking so many hours. We had data all over the place, and it was getting to be quite impossible. So I made sure that I had other staff, not just me, but other staff advocating to our senior management, saying we need this as well. So I think the more people that you can get on your side, and being vocal about that, the harder it is then for senior management to say that it's not necessary, or that we shouldn't at least give it a go. And then I guess I'd say the final thing is I worked hard to try to not only show how it could solve our initial pain points, but to sort of sell a future vision of what it could look like, and that we should be being aspirational as an organization. And the exciting thing about Salesforce is that you've got access to the most incredible technology. And even now, Salesforce having inbuilt AI functionality, for a small charity to have access to that level of technology, it really gets you thinking not only about how you can solve your current problems, but you think, gosh, well, if we could solve this, what else could we do? And I think that sort of aspiration, that future vision, really helped to not only get people sold, but actually enthused and excited about it. So it was quite a journey, but we got there in the end. And then we had the challenge of doing exactly the same thing at TPT.
Great, thanks, Alexia. So lots of learning there, and I think that bounces nicely into the next topic around exec sponsorship, which is you've kind of alluded to, obviously, everybody understanding those benefits, and being able to see it through those case studies and those visits, which I think is really powerful, and we've seen that does really work to help people get it, because a Salesforce system, you can download a trial, but you don't necessarily see it in the way that you might use it. And so actually seeing relevant ways that it can be built out and used for your own use case is really powerful. Now, when it comes to the exec sponsors, we're kind of bouncing this up to say, well, we've identified, people do want it. We've identified that these are some of the business benefits we could have. How do you then sort of draw down the funding, if you like, or secure time and resource and effort to put into this? So when we look at exec sponsors, they hold the money, really, and also people's time and effort and where that's going to go. And quite often they want to see measures of success either financially, which might be hard-earned cash, like how is this going to help us make more money, or how is it going to save us money? What's the business case for this? So could you just share a little bit about what was the business case for these organizations? Were there kind of smart measures around sort of financial success or impact or whatever it was that convinced them to do it?
Sure. Well, obviously we'd already had the experience at Visionary by that point. And we had the Visionary CEO was a really great advocate for us when we're in TPT, who said, we've been on this journey, we can see the difference it's made, particularly in terms of how much time it had saved. We'd managed to automate a lot of our processes, particularly around events and conferences, which we could demonstrate how many staff hours had been saved by implementing Salesforce. So the Visionary CEO was a really helpful advocate for that. And we've done a lot of work in Visionary around supporting our membership to become more outcomes focused, and started to do a lot of work in response to the demand for impact measurement support. So there was all this sort of buzz around impact measurement in Visionary, and that started to filter through into TPT. And so one of the things that we really latched onto was the fact that our board wanted to start about thinking differently about how we measure our impact. Only a few years ago, we were a very different kind of organization. We were mainly providing housing to just a few hundred people, and were producing a lot of research. And those were our two main functions. But over the course of sort of 5 years, we've shifted considerably, doing a lot more frontline services, reaching thousands instead of hundreds of people. So our board was very keen to make sure that we start to think differently about our KPIs, what impact means and how we might demonstrate it. And so I came in, they had a newly created role as head of impact and evaluation, which I came into last year. So I acknowledged that there was already this appetite from our board to better demonstrate our impact. And so really that was the argument that I latched on to, and was saying that well, if we're going to be able to measure our impact across all these different functions and the thousands of people that we're now serving, we have to have a CRM. It kind of felt like it wasn't really an option to not. So I tried to demonstrate how a CRM focused on how it could help us measure our impact. And of course, things like the return on investment, particularly in the amount of time that it could save staff, was important as well. But for our board, it was really the impact measurement that helped to sell it. And I went and spoke at our senior leadership team meeting. I went and spoke to our charitable investment committee. I had a session with our board, and rather than focusing on the CRM, I focused on how we'd measure our impact, but incorporated Salesforce or CRM into that, so it didn't look like too much of a hard sell. But they started to see that it was a necessary instrument, even if they still didn't quite understand what it was and what it could do. But ultimately, and I think it depends on the culture of your organization, but I feel very fortunate that I work in an organization where our chief exec and our board very much trust in the expertise of their staff. So that if you have a staff member who's telling you that you need something, they're inclined to trust that member of staff if they've got that experience, to say, right, well, I might not understand why, but if you're telling us that we do, then we're going to trust you. So it's put a lot on us to be able to prove that this has been worth the investment. We have invested more this time round, be it in terms of support from economic change, in terms of even Salesforce licenses, in terms of how much staff time we're taking up. So we have had a little bit more pressure to be able to prove, but we knew that we could. We knew it was worth it. And so what we're doing now is we're focusing on one or two teams that have been better placed to get further ahead in their journey, and focusing on getting them going live so that we can then demonstrate a couple of successful cases. So there's then the support to continue that momentum and that investment.
Brilliant, thanks, Alexa. That's a really great story, and I think the key points that stood out for me was, understanding what are the pain points and the needs of the board, because then you can tie it into there and sell it into there, as well as the solution that will help them achieve their objectives. So it's really that, if you reflect on the difference between exec sponsors and senior managers, the exec sponsors are interested in, the priorities for the organisation, and where time and money, if a CRM solution doesn't help achieve the organizational priorities, it's not going to be top of their list. So if you can tie it in there, that's a great example of how you've done that. And from a senior management point of view, about those day-to-day sort of team management priorities. So that's all really great. So I'm hoping we'll be able to bring Russell back into the next conversation around business analysis, because Russell's very much involved in the day-to-day development of the systems now. So once you've got buy-in, what you'll then want to now crack on with really is around that business analysis stage. So this is about how do we empower stakeholders to redesign the way they work. And so the key sort of areas that we talk to clients around is, how do you do process mapping with them? How do you map out their day-to-day work and streamline it using technology? What elicitation techniques do you use to gather requirements, gather what their user stories are, and really understand what it is that's going to help them with their day-to-day job and in the cost savings, etc. And then how are you going to document these requirements and solutions so they're all written down? And quite often it's useful to have, this is what somebody wanted, this is why, i.e. the business case, and you've got that note of who asked for that. So if anybody ever left the organisation, or 6 months down the line you're going, well, why did we do that again? You've got that audit trail to say, well, it was asked for this reason, this was the value, and you've got it all really mapped out. and you understand why things have been built in the system a certain way, because inevitably, new people will come in, new team members will join, and they'll say, well, why did we do this? And actually, can't we do it this way? And that's absolutely fine. A system will evolve, but you've got that sort of that track record. So, Russell, hoping we can bring you back in here. So what's been your approach to business analysis?
Can you hear me now?
We can.
Hey.
Hey, oh, finally. Sorry, everyone, for the issues. Yeah, so we've been really keen. Obviously, the system's going to be used by the actual by the users, obviously. So it's really key that they're actually a part of designing the system. And one of the questions that came up when we're letting people use it is there was a lot of concerns around the system dictating the services, but it was obviously we had to kind of reassure people that it's the old way around, that your services will dictate the system. So we've been involved getting every team to sit down and actually map out their processes, so that we've got a nice, almost like a benchmark, so we can see where they are now, exactly what it is they do now. And then I can sit down with them and say, well, have you considered doing it this way? Have you considered this? These are the automations that we can build in, and then eventually we'll have an end point as well, so we'll be able to see where they were before the CRM and now where they are without after the CRM, once it's all up and running and fully automated and all fully embedded. It gives us a nice comparison and a little bit of evidence as well to say that this is how we've improved things for all of you. So yeah, that's kind of our approach. I've been making sure I've been trying to get into as many team meetings, getting it on team meeting agendas. So where Alexa's got the executive buy-in, if you like, I've been going around and getting the lead team engaged a lot more, sort of for one-to-ones, and actually explaining as well as the overall vision for the system. This is what it'll actually mean for your teams. This is how much time it can save you. This is where we can build in steps in your processes, and even remove steps from your processes where you can build in your automation. You no longer need staff interaction to make a process happen, and it's been really, really positively received. And everyone's, I'm really actually quite delighted at how engaged everyone actually really is. And when you start explaining to people a lot more about what a system can actually do for them, and because a lot of people don't really understand what a CRM is and what it can actually do, and when you start explaining to people that this is what it can do, they're really quite, they're all really looking forward to it, and it's fantastic, really.
That's great. Thanks, Russell. And I think it's really valuable for you to talk about, you're doing one-to-ones as well as the typical kind of workshops, and there's benefits of doing both. And I think that's the benefit of having somebody internally within a charity who does get Salesforce and can support end users internally, because what we find particularly with the charities is their budget for consultancy is obviously quite restricted normally to the design workshops, where it's a lot of group collaboration discussions, which is great, and definitely we can, you can see people are excited around that. But I think if you've got somebody internally like you have, Russell, where then you can go and sit with them one-to-one and talk through their own journey and really map it out as well, it really builds up that confidence for them and that level of detail that kind of helps them figure out what is it that it's really going to do and change. And I think we really encourage and capacity build wherever possible somebody internally to sort of take on that role. So it's really lovely to hear that that's happening internally.
Yeah.
And developing all that out.
Absolutely, but the process mapping is quite a big job. It can take quite a lot of thought, really, can't it? So it's good. It's nice that we've got that luxury to be able to actually get people thinking about it. And there's clear people within each team that are more infused, and have either worked with the CRM before or have worked with Salesforce before. So we've kind of engaging them and giving them sort of like a champion role, if you like. So they're really sort of driving the enthusiasm within their own team, kind of without sort of me being there as well. It's nice to have a lot of backup within each team, and we've not had any issue at all identifying these champions and really sort of trying to put them to work at sort of engaging people a lot more and really selling it for us.
Brilliant. Okay, that's perfect. So moving then nicely on to sort of change management bit. So it's great to hear you have a champion team. So what I'd love to ask is, well, how did you identify champions? Did how did that come about? Did you put out like a little job spec, or did people volunteer, or did people put, were they nominated? So it'd be great to talk about that a bit more in a moment. And I think the other kind of key bit with change management is the communication strategy. So how have you communicated within the organization through different ways that a CRM is coming, and this is what you need to sort of do to get involved? So it'd be great to sort of just talk about your communication strategy. And then how have you supported people to train up in Salesforce, bearing in mind different personalities, access requirements, styles of learning? How are you empowering them to actually then get to grips with it and move it through? So can you just share a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of our sort of comms strategy, we're quite fortunate. We've got lots of avenues of communication within the organisation. We've got sort of email, social media, internal thing, workplace, and internal newsletters that go out every month as well. So before we even put anything out publicly, we like to say, I can get sort of went around doing one-to-ones with all the senior team, letting them know this is coming, this is what's happening, this is what the comms are going to start going out. And it was just around letting, the first instance was around letting people know it's coming. And then I hosted a webinar just to explain to people what a CRM was, what it's going to do for you, and then opened it up to Q&A as well, so I could manage some expectations as well, and actually answer the questions which I knew would be concerns, and I knew there'd be anxiety around, especially around, like you say, accessibility. It's a big thing, and I think around 30% of our workforce are assistive technology users, so it is a real big thing. And there's been some history there where we've rolled out a particular piece of software and it's turned out not to be accessible. So there's a lot of anxiety around will the Salesforce be accessible. So it's around addressing that head on and really tackling it and actually mentioning it rather than waiting to be mentioned. But in terms of my actual comms strategy at the moment, it's a kind of a slow start, and then it'll start ramping up as we've got more to shout about, as people start going live, as the UAT starts going through, and then really starts sharing some success from within, and kind of engage momentum, get the momentum of the engagement and the excitement ramped up as it's coming and as it's getting closer and closer. And then when people are going live, get them to sort of share as well via the social media around how great it is and how fantastic it is, which hopefully they won't need prompting to do, because it will be. So
brilliant, thank you. And how did you recruit your champion teams then? So you said there was no shortage of people were interested. How did you go about that?
Originally it was going to be advertised, but people just came forward and said that they'd like to be a lot more involved than others. So actually, like, the original plan was to put it out there and ask for people to get involved. I think there was only one team where we actually kind of had to get it raised on one of their team meeting agendas, but everyone else just came forward and said, look, I'd really like to be more involved in this. Can you tell me what's happening? How can I help? How can I get involved? So yeah, we're really fortunate that the champions kind of elected themselves, really.
Okay, great. And talk us through a little bit about how you're training people. What's your strategy to training end users?
Very much a multi-pronged approach, really. I mean, we're going to put lots of guidance documents together as well. And like I say, there's a lot of concerns around AT users, assistive technology users. So fortunately, we've got one of our screen reader users is also getting quite involved in the project. So she's going to help with the training of AT users and get some guidance documents. So we've got supportive documents in place, face-to-face training, where necessary, one-to-one. So I've taken some good learnings from our tech team, who rolled out around 8 months ago a whole new IT system where we moved from Citrix over to the Dropbox for Business, system, and they shared some good learnings and some things that they would do differently. So I kind of can take from that and really build on the knowledge that they've been able to share with me, which is really good. And also we can use Salesforce to actually monitor user adoption, and then we can actually get some user adoption dashboards up and running, and see who's really engaged, who's logging in all the time, who's doing what they should be doing, and then finding the people that aren't, and then approaching them sort of one-to-one, just to give them a little bit more education when, if needed, and getting feedback as well. I think is going to be really key to our user adoption, getting key feedback on the training that's being delivered and where we can refine it, and hopefully go from there, and get everyone on board.
Brilliant, thanks, Russell. And what's going to be your strategy for sort of supporting that feedback loop? What are you going to do to get feedback from people? What strategy have you got?
It will most probably take just a nice little survey that we can knock up. I'm also going to build in just a really simple little object within Salesforce, a little suggestion box, so people can ping suggestions over to me as and when they need, and as and when they find anything. So it won't just be around the training itself, it'll be around the system itself. If there's anything that people can identify, any improvements that could be made, anything that's not necessarily working how they envisaged it, and how it didn't come across in UAT, it wasn't picked up, so there'll be opportunity there. And I've throughout this whole process, I've always tried to advocate the fact that I've got very much an open door. So if there's any concerns or anything, then please get in touch, and I'm more than happy to speak to people one-on-one, or address it more publicly if it's a wider issue, if it's a more commonly raised issue.
Brilliant, thank you. Great. Okay, so we're at the point where people are using the system and they can feed back to you with your open door, which is amazing. Now the final bit is around data integrity then. So obviously everybody's using the system, and one of the key reasons why CRMs fail is that, you know, people say the data is not trusted or not up to date. Now that isn't necessarily the way that a system's designed issue. It's actually around the business rules that go within the organization. Say, well, actually we now use Salesforce, this is now what you need to put in the system as part of your day-to-day role, and this is what good data quality looks like. And I think having a really clear picture of what good data integrity looks like is a good starting point, because if people said it wasn't good before, well, why wasn't it good? Let's really dig into that and find out what wasn't. Is it because there's duplicates? Is it because there's old people in there? You know, what should the business rules be like now, and what data integrity, you know, practices need to be put into place, and whose responsibility is that? So is it the team members day to day? If they're interacting with a contact, it's their responsibility to update things or check duplicates, or is it something that a system manager owns, or somebody's role within the organization owns, that they need to oversee data integrity and have a set of reports and dashboards set up so they can monitor that, they can monitor duplicates, and really clarify that. So how is that playing out? How did that play out at Visionary, and how is that playing out now at Thomas Pocklington Trust? What was your plan in regards in terms of data integrity?
In terms of Visionary, Alexa might be better placed to answer, because she was around more at the initial launch. But in terms of TPT, I've recently put on a couple of data cleansing workshops just around getting people in the mindset of what good data looks like, so that when the system's ready, their data's ready to go on there. And on the back of that, we've sort of identified a few things where we're going to enforce some good standards, some good practice around what data should look like. But in terms of once it's actually in Salesforce, you've got a lot more control, obviously, around data validation and stuff. But we're also using the data cleansing, the data integrity side of things as a real good opportunity to revisit the GDPR compliance. And we're asking people, as well as what data do you want to go in there, but what legal basis have you got for actually holding that data? And if they can't justify that, then why are we holding it? And as well, it's a good time to get people to think about their retention strategy as well. How long do they want to hold data for? Why are we holding things for so long? So in terms of actually who owns it, I think the onus is really on the people that currently manage the data silos and the legacy data. But then, like you say, it's very easy from an admin point of view to set up dashboards and find out what fields aren't being used. And as part of the review process for the implementation, so sort of a few months down the line, we can look at which fields are being used, which fields aren't being used, and then reevaluate. Do we need them in there? If we don't need them in there, then we can strip them out and make the system a lot easier to use and a lot more user friendly for the end user.
Brilliant, absolutely. And third-party apps like Field Trip are great for that, because they can sort of tell you how many times it's been used and things like that. Because quite often people say, oh, you want all this data, or if you're migrating data, you get a lot of fields there. But then if nobody's updating it, it really goes back to, I love the fact that that GDPR process definitely has helped that conversation, because we talk about what's compulsory, what is the absolute compulsory data that a contact or an account should not be put in the system without this information, and then what's the core information. And that's been a really good discussion point for people to really reflect back on, or what is the data we really need about these people. And that you can go to that other point of like, do we even need their data in the system? So they're all great points. Alexa, have you got anything else you'd like to add to that as we finish up this last step?
I mean, for us, when we started in Visionary, we had a huge amount of information on paper documents as well as Excel spreadsheets, and so actually most of our data entry was manual in getting the data into Salesforce. But when you have to do something manually, then I think it really makes you focus on what do we actually need. So we managed to get rid of a huge amount of data that we really didn't need. So I wouldn't be too dismayed if you know that you're going to have to go through quite a manual process, because that in itself will really help streamline your thinking. But yeah, it does take a little bit longer to get to that point.
Brilliant, thanks so much. Okay, great. So really useful insight. Thank you so much for sharing your journey as we've walked through. If anybody would like to ask any questions, then please do put them in the question panel and we can answer those in a moment for you. So hopefully that's been useful, just to kind of share some insight into what we do at Economic Change. So if you do need support with your CRM strategy, where we capacity people internally on their Salesforce journey, then we run a CRM strategy training and coaching program now, which is just £500 plus VAT, but we'll provide coaching and training on all these aspects, but in much more detail, to kind of help you through that process. So we've got online training modules as well as group coaching webinars, and then we share other case studies such as this one, and we also have a chatter group so you can share with others. If you want more in-depth support, then we provide our normal consultancy services around which is one-to-one support, which is more of our support contracts, where you can ring up and get help as you need, or we provide our consultancy services where we get our hands dirty working with you and your teams to kind of really roll out Salesforce. So I've just got one question at the moment. So will the slides be available after the webinar? So yes, they will. I'll send out these slide decks to you. We've got an 18-point document, which is we can just email to you with the key points on. So I think it's great to hear your journey. Thank you, Alexa and Russell, for joining us and talking through that. And hopefully it's giving you some food for thought. So I hope you all have a great day on a Monday. Have a great week. Thanks again for joining us, and speak to you all soon. Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.